All right. Welcome back, pool nerds. Thanks for joining me again. This is Railbird Radio, and I am Adam King. It's going to be a unique episode tonight. My plan was to interview the winner of last weekend's Energy Capital 9-Ball Classic, but as fate would have it, that winner was me. So you guys are going to get a little bit of my story tonight, and I hope that's okay. I hope it's helpful to you and that you enjoy it. I've never done an episode like this before, so I hope it goes off okay. But before we get started, I got a couple things to say, a little addendum to my previous two episodes. The first one, I rethought my feelings about the APA. I've been dogging on them a little bit about, keeping good players down and not really promoting their players to get better. But you know what? They do have the APA Masters, which caters, of course, exclusively to the best players in the APA, where I think everybody plays even or something like that. I really need to look up how that works more. But I do believe in the APA Masters, everybody plays even races, and it's possibly just sevens and sixes. But anyhow, I just, some friends mentioned it to me, and I've never played the APA, so I was like, you know what, you really should reserve your judgment on something that you don't know a ton about. So to the APA, I apologize. They have a great business plan, and they're the biggest league, and they've really managed their business well. So really, my hat's off to those guys. And maybe one day I'll jump in the APA Masters and see what I'm made of. Secondly, last episode, I sort of laid out why I was doing the podcast. And, I talked a little bit about, wanting to be the voice of pool and some various other things, but I'm not particularly sure that's true. My real inspiration for doing the podcast was, pool hall conversations. Like when you're all sitting around the pool hall and you're talking about a certain type of shot that you missed, or, you were hill last week against a guy you always seem to lose against and you dogged it again. Like, why is that? Like, why is that guy in your head? Or that other good player over there, conversely, that you always beat, even though maybe he's, a better player than you in a lot of respects. You just have his number and you always smash him. I find all that stuff interesting, and different theories guys have about banking balls and kicking balls and aiming systems and all that stuff. I dig those conversations, and so I wanted to bring those to the public a little bit, where maybe in a broader aspect we can kick those ideas around and maybe form some better opinions about them. But basically, I'm a huge fan of pool. And I like all these subjects. I like how complex the game is, and all the cool kind of conversations and situations that come out of that. So that's really why I'm doing the podcast. I enjoy that kind of stuff, and from having conversations in the pool hall with a lot of other players, I think a lot of players enjoy that type of talk as well. And I've already gotten some good feedback on the other podcast. And even though those are all interviews, and they're not all going to be interviews, we're going to go over a lot of different stuff. I got a ton of ideas. I'm working out the studio space now, so we'll hopefully pretty soon we're going to have a much better venue to do this, where I can produce episodes more often, a little bit easier. But I had a theme tonight, and I wanted to tell a story. My story, as it turns out this time, but I want to tell a lot of other players' stories too. The question of how do you win one of these big events? And more specifically, how do you win one of these events when you're pretty certain that you're not the best player there? And this is something we all kick around. We all think about it. We all have a bit of anxiety over it. So I'm going to tell you how I did it. And hopefully that can help you win in the future, or at least get you thinking about a slightly different way to prepare for these things, and boost your finishes overall over 12 months or whatever, however it may be. So this story requires a little bit of setup. This tournament I just won was the 6th annual Andy Cloth Energy Capital 9-Ball Classic in Gillette, Wyoming. It is run by a friend of mine who is now a friend of mine named Chuck Wise. He's a local there in Gillette. It's the only tournament he runs, and it's absolutely one of the best tournaments in not just all of Wyoming, but in the entire Midwest region around Denver here. And a ton of the Denver players go up. He gets helped out by the guys in Saratoga and Rawlins, the Andy Cloth guys, EJ Gold, Anthony Lucero, Monty Thayer. They set the tables up for him, and I think well, they definitely sponsor it. I'm not sure how however the money works out, but in any case, they help Chuck out a lot, and Chuck really appreciates those guys. But anyhow, I love this tournament. Like I said, I went 4 years ago now, and I got second place, and I loved it. You know, you make really good money. The Calcutta goes off huge. But the thing I noticed about getting second, you get a cool wood trophy for second. But for first place, you get a handmade knife from Oliver Custom Knives up there in Gillette. And Oliver does fantastic work. These knives are beautiful. They're amazing. He uses like a pool, the butt end of a pool cue as the handle, and they're really cool, and they're a really unique trophy. So the tournament is ultra tough. It pays well, and it has a really cool trophy that you get if you win it. And so I always thought about that. I was like, man, I really want that knife. Like, how cool would that be to have that, on your shelf? Like, it's just such a sweet trophy. So, that tournament from that day forward, the first time I went, it always held kind of a special place in my heart. And Chuck runs it really smooth. There's no problems. Excuse me. And, so I always really wanted to win it. Well, I go up the next year, and I do okay. I get like 7th, 8th, or something like that. So not a bad finish, but, I didn't get the knife. Then the next year I went, I didn't even make the money. I didn't make it out of the preliminary rounds. And it turns out my good buddy that I rode up there with, Justin Reckmeyer, shout out to Justin, he double dipped a great player, Mark Vidal, in the final. And so he had a fantastic tournament. He was kind of an underdog there, and he came out on top, showed a ton of heart. And I had him in the Calcutta, so I ended up making a lot of money too. And so it was a really fun ride home. We went and got some steaks and beer and stuff, and it was a good time. But this year, and sort of the beginning of my preparation story, I had been thinking about this tournament since January of this year. And I really, I wanted to win it, as always, like I said, but I also knew that the field is really difficult, and I hadn't been putting forth my best possible effort to win it. So, probably 30 to 40 days before the tournament, I really started rethinking how I play the game in 9-ball, which I haven't done in a long time. I've been a good player now for many years. And, oftentimes, probably the fault of players as they get better is they stop looking backwards at the simple things that made them good to begin with. And we all kind of know this, but we still don't go backwards and look at it. We don't really run through the aspects of the game that are the important parts of winning. So, to not do that this time, I actually went back to some pool books. Actually, one book in particular, Phil Capel, the late, great Phil Capel, wrote an outstanding series of books called Play Your Best Pool. And he has one that's just Play Your Best Pool, Play Your Best 8-ball, Play Your Best 9-ball, Play Your Best Straight Pool, and Play Your Best 1-pocket. I'm not sure if he has any more than those, but I'm certain he has those. And the Play Your Best 9-ball book is probably one of the best pieces of pool literature I've ever read, and I've read very many of them. So I really went back through that book to start spurring my imagination and saying, okay, what should I be practicing really? Like, where are the weak spots that I've slowly let filter into my game? And I went through everything in preparation for this tournament. I went through hitting a ball very thin when you're very far away from it, comes up a lot in 9 ball. You have to thin a guy on the bottom rail and then bring the cue ball back up table. I concentrated on controlling my object ball speed, after contact, where a lot of times in 9 ball you're forced to play like all object ball for the safe or all cue ball for the safe. So I really went over those and, kind of gruelingly practiced some of these safeties and stuff, stuff that's not that fun to practice. And that's really the important thing to keep in mind is you always, in everything in life, you have to do the stuff that no one else wants to do if you want to be successful. And so I made sure to practice all the things that I thought my opponents weren't practicing. I really sharpened up my banking. Like I said, I practiced my safety play. I practiced stuff that I already figured I had a good handle on, like 2 rail routes into the corner, 3 rail routes into the corner, going 1 rail up and down the table without scratching. What kind of English do I need to use when the ball's frozen to go straight across the table and then straight back to where that ball started? All those things that we kind of think of as being relatively simple things. Nothing's simple when you're under a lot of pressure. So you need to have those things really down pat. There's that saying, perfect practice is what makes a perfect player. Well, I really took that, that saying to heart this time and was like, let's really put good moves on the ball. Of course, I worked on my break, and not just one break, not just the break that you prefer to hit. You need 3 or even 4 spots that you can break from that you feel really comfortable with. And also, if you always break from the right, well, break from the left several times, because you're going to sight that ball differently. A lot of people that break right in the middle of the table on the breaking from the right side, well, they'll scratch breaking from the left side, and so they get tense and they won't do it. Well, if the guy you're playing is breaking from the left side and making all kinds of balls, and you're breaking from the right side and coming up dry, well, you need to know how to move over there and get that break done too. So I worked on a lot of different breaks for this tournament. And a good example of that is, breaking from the side rail, sort of a standard 9-ball break to make the corner ball or the one on the side. And then work on a cut break, half ball. Everybody hits this a little different. I use 1 tip low, 1 tip right, breaking from slightly outside of center on the right side, and cut those balls because, cut the cue ball to the 3rd diamond and bring it back out in the middle of the table or all the way back across, depending on how fast the table is. All these breaks, you should have a good idea of how to use it. Break from the box a few times. Get a couple ball widths outside of center, and crack them right in the middle and see, how comfortable you are with that. See how accurate you are. And then move it out, 4 or 5 ball widths from center and same thing. Once again, this familiarity with all these things, that's what's going to matter when you're under the pressure. When you're like, hey, this guy's breaking from XYZ spot, you need to be able to move right in there and take over that break if that's the break that's gonna win you the event. Sorry, my computer was jazzing out. I thought we had a little issue here, but we're still good. Excellent. So I prepared early. Like that's the overall thing. I started early. I was thinking about this tournament. I was thinking about how to win it. Okay. When I got up there, no drinking, which I'm a guy, I like to drink. I have 3-4 beers a night, which I realize for some of you guys, that's, that's kiddie drinking. But for me, that's enough. But I took the drinking out. I said, you know what? We're going to have as clear a head as we possibly can have. And then eating, eat at the right time. Always eat hour and a half, 2 hours before your match, or you can even have like a Snickers bar or a Cliff bar or whatever you choose, like right before your match. But make sure you're going to go into that match with the proper blood sugar, because that's what helps you think clearly during the match. A lot of people negate this. They eat breakfast in the morning, and then 5, 6, 7 hours later, they've been grinding in these matches, and they completely fall apart because their glucose levels are all out of control. So plan your meals out as best you can. Sometimes the matches are a little erratic or there's not good food as handy as you would like it, but at least put a concerted effort into keeping your glucose levels correct when you're playing those matches. And then the game just seems much easier. The pressure doesn't seem to bother you as much. You actually see clearer when your glucose levels are right. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. That, and keep hydrated. Drink some water. If you're used to drinking soda all the time, at least during your match, I realize you're going to have to pee more, but, drink some water. Another thing I did this tournament when it talks to drinking, or what I was putting in my body at least, instead of drinking coffee in the mornings, which I usually always do, but sometimes you drink coffee and it kind of upsets your stomach, and man, you got to poop. You got to poop in the middle of your match. No one likes that. So I actually switched to green tea. It's got enough caffeine to curb the addiction, and but it won't upset your stomach. So there was a little bit of a green tea solution going on there as far as the tournament win went, and that really made me feel a lot better. Also, sleeping. Sleep is really important to how you're going to perform. So, if you're hanging out with the boys or whatever the night, the second day of the tournament and you're having a couple beers, you really got to watch yourself. Make sure that you get 7-8 hours of sleep, enough where you're not going to wake up, freaked out or foggy eyed because you might have the toughest match of your whole tournament. The morning of the second day actually happens all the time. If you start at 9 a.m., maybe you went to bed at 1 or 2 in the morning, you've been drinking a little bit, so your body's already not going to sleep as well as it could. It's super important, especially the older you get. I mean, that's cliche, but you know what? It's cliche because it's true. When you're 22, you can hop out of bed and you can get the job done maybe, with a lot less resources. But, I'm in my mid 30s now. It's really important to get enough sleep, come out strong the next day. Matter of fact, we had a couple of guys at this tournament stay out late gambling. One guy missed his match. I won't mention his name. I don't want to embarrass him, but stayed out late. He was gambling, missed his match in the morning. And then a couple other guys told me that they, just played like crap in their match because they just weren't prepared for those morning matches. And if you want to win one of these big tournaments, you absolutely have to be prepared to play good in the morning, whether you like it or not. The other guy probably doesn't like it either. So, it's just up to you to get it done. And a little bit just going through the tournament. I lost a match. My second match, I lost to a good player named Matt Sanchez. And I was getting frustrated. I wasn't controlling the cue ball very well. And the cue ball is a red circle cue ball, which if you've been in the game a while, you remember everybody used to play with that red circle cue ball. Not to be confused with the red dot cue ball, the measle ball. I'm talking about the slightly older school red circle cue ball. And on the bar table, it plays a little quick, like it kind of spins off the rail a little faster than you're expecting. It draws really easy. You got to worry about overdrawing it. I had several shots in the tournament where I really overdrew them out of the blue. But I was kind of being arrogant with it. I was trying to just make that cue ball do what I wanted it to do, instead of what it was dictating to me that it wanted to do. And in that Matt Sanchez match, I once again, it was a little bit of an ego trip. I was just like, no, I'm going to keep doing exactly what I've been doing because what I'm doing is right. And I know I'm right, yada, yada. And I wasn't. I kept losing control of my cue ball, and I kept getting out of position and, thus making mistakes. And Matt put it on me and beat me. So after that match, I reevaluated and I was like, hey, you are not doing the correct things that it takes to control this cue ball at this tournament right now. So from then on, every time there was a free, an open table in the tournament room, I was the first one on it. I was out there, I was practicing, constantly. As a matter of fact, if you go on to badrollinc.com and watch some of these matches that Joshua Ramey recorded for you guys, you can hear someone breaking in the background, again and again and again. That was me. That was me pretty much every time. I never quit practicing for the rest of the tournament. because I was determined to figure out what this cue ball wanted from me so that I could really get my cue ball in line. And by the end of the tournament, I had it pretty well figured out, at least as well figured out as anybody in the tournament, and that's all that really matters. So, don't let your ego get in the way. Just because you're a good player doesn't mean that you're not going to have to make an adjustment right now that might be the most important thing you do the entire tournament. So, after I lose to Matt, I'm on the loser's side. I grind my way back through to make it to the last 16. And I bring this up because, now I have a 9 a.m. match. I'm sorry. We had a match later at night, 9 p.m. ish. And I play Anthony Lucero. I'm sorry, I played Monty Thayer, then I played Anthony in the morning. That's why I'm actually trying to get to the Anthony match. I had my matches a little miscombobulated there. My bad. So I make it through that night against Monty, and I play Anthony Lucero in the morning. Now, the reason I bring this up is because Anthony had just run through Tony Piazza, one of the very best players in our region, and Andrew Pettinger. Some guys know him as ATM, another one of the very best players in our region. Anthony had just beat those guys back to back. And, now he's got to play me at 9 a.m. And where he had played almost perfectly on those guys, hardly missed a ball, really, had held himself together. In this match, the match against me at 9 a.m., you could see his pace really slowly start to increase as his adrenaline levels started to rise. And it was real apparent to me. And I was like, oh, because our match was pretty close. It's like 3-3, 4-4. And he's getting some chances, and he's taking advantage of them. But I notice his pace increasing. And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, oh, I've seen this before, got a lot of experience. And I was like, this looks like a guy that might not hold it together right in this moment. He's starting to think about winning. At least that was my interpretation of it. And I love Anthony, by the way. This is no means a diss on him. But he started going faster and faster, faster and faster. And then near the end of the match, right when it was crunch time, he missed a big 8-ball that would have tied the match up. And he scratched. Just because he really didn't look exactly at where he needed his cue ball to be. And that's really the only reason I got through that match. Or otherwise, I would have been just like Tony and Andy, and I would have, been on the loser's side. And so that was, kind of a lesson that I wanted to bring up. Like, the further you get in the tournament, you're going to be more nervous. Always. And it happens to everybody. Even if you've won 1,000 of these things, you still get nervous the deeper you go because you've been playing for 2 or 3 days or more. And, the pressure's pumping up. So your adrenaline pumps up and you go faster, and then you make those errors. And it's something to be very wary of. As soon as you feel that, like, oh, well, I want to go. And it can be a good feeling, of course, when you're doing well. But it's a good idea to check that pace and go back to, how am I performing right now? What do I want to do? A, B, C. Keep yourself in line. Keep your adrenaline levels a little more even. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. It's kind of a valuable lesson. And you know what? You saw it a little bit with Adam Cisneros' match against Sam Cordova. Adam Cisneros was going to beat him for the quarterfinals. Had a good shot. And he had been playing at this very measured pace the entire tournament. And he got a shot that he really didn't expect to get. Sam missed. And then Adam jumped right up there and shot the ball really quickly and ended up missing it. Felt bad for the guy. He had a great tournament. I thought I was going to play him in the finals, actually. But, it's another case. Your adrenaline spikes, and everybody does it. I'm going to do it next tournament. You never know. But it's something to keep in mind and something that I kept under control this event. My match with Jim Winter for the hot seat after that Anthony Lucero match, there's a lesson in that match as well. I had been really focusing on my performance the entire tournament, and doing pretty well. Playing well as I expected to, and playing for the hot seat, I get up a few games, and it looks like I'm going to kind of get through this match relatively easily. And then, you know, I started having those thoughts of like, oh boy, like, man, I might actually win this thing. You know, I'm right here. I'm at the end. I'm all pumped up. I'm ready to go. Oh my God, I'm actually gonna do it. I'm gonna get that stupid knife that I've been wanting. And and you know, you get pumped up. I immediately started dogging it. Immediately, I missed a straight in 4 ball. I missed some positions. I stopped. Wasn't breaking very well, and it was all because I shifted my focus from performing to winning, and that is one of the most paramount things that you can do in a tournament or when you're playing at all. As soon as you focus on the end result, you probably are going to stop executing as well as you should. It's, you know, one shot at a time. Everybody says that. It's cliche, but it's because it works. If you just think about making this ball and getting position and making this ball and getting position again and again and again, that produces wins, or at least gives you the very best chance to produce wins. As soon as you start thinking about winning, you're no longer thinking about just pocketing balls and getting position. Everything looks harder. You know, it's almost like your focus becomes broad again, and you start thinking about the fans and, you know, the people watching on the live stream and how much money you're going to win and, you know, the cool trophies you're going to get, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was a lesson there. I started dogging it. Luckily, I got some really good rolls in that match. In any other case, I probably would have lost that hot seat match. But Jim ended up scratching 2 times in a row. Really unfortunately, both times. And both times were on the 7 ball. So I didn't have to do hardly anything. Just run a few balls. He let me right back in. Sometimes that happens. And absolutely, you know, it's another cliche thing you hear about pool, but that's absolutely truth, is you have to get lucky to win. You know, when you're in those situations, you've got to get a good roll. Very often, does someone just play so good that he outplays the rolls. So I definitely got fortunate in the hot seat match. Well, so then, turns out Sam Cordova, fantastic player, great grinder. No surprise to anyone in attendance that he was in the final with me. He comes through. Plays very well on me in the first set. We go hill, and once again, I had started thinking about winning. I mean, you know, when you're in the final, it's very difficult because, you know, you are literally very close to winning the tournament. So you kind of, you know, you have to constantly reaffirm to yourself, you're like, no, stop thinking about winning. Shut up right now. Just make the ball and get position. Just make the ball and get position, or whatever mantra you want to espouse. But you can't think about winning. In the first set, I was way caught up with winning. The set was very close the whole time, you know, 4-4, 5-5, 6-6. And I couldn't really shake the thought of winning the tournament. Well, you know, Sam breaks and runs on the hill. Plays a very good run out, you know, beats me. And I'm like, man, this is going to be tough. Now here we are, last set. And I'm sitting in the chair. And I made a deal with myself right then. I said, you know, don't disrespect yourself by rushing and taking things for granted. Because the first set, Sam let me have some really good opportunities, stuff that I would run out, you know, 99% of the time. And I'd failed because I was like, oh, look at these nice, easy opportunities. I'm just going to buzz through these super quick, blah, 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 blah. And I wasn't respecting the game. And thus I was disrespecting myself, you know, by not giving myself the opportunities that I should have. So I said, I'm not going to disrespect myself in the second set. And if I lose, that's absolutely fine. I made peace with being that close and having that good of an opportunity to win. I made peace with losing. But the only way I was going to make peace with losing is if I gave every shot everything I had. I said, if you give it everything you have, then losing is no problem whatsoever. You know you did everything, and that's all you can ask from yourself. So we're going to be okay with it. And then it turns out I grinded the set out. I ended up winning 7-1. Once again, I got some good rolls that helped me out along the way. Sam, I think, got a little fatigue from grinding through the loser side. I think he had 3 hill matches in a row, counting our previous match that went hill. So I mean, the guy's been grinding, and I figure maybe he got a little bit of fatigue because he missed a couple of balls that a guy like him almost never misses. And it kind of allowed me to win relatively, given the situation, easily. And so I was super pumped up. I got the knife finally. I was super happy, and I won a lot of money. I haven't won that much money in a couple of years. And I got this prestigious title in the toughest field that had ever been assembled for the Energy Capital Classic. So once again, I was very proud of myself. I was proud of how I prepared, and I was proud of how I kept it together mentally, which, as any pool player knows that's ever competed, that's the more difficult part. Playing is, a distant second to keeping it together mentally, I think. But anyway, that's my story. That's how, I would say the theme or the lesson that I would try to teach there is prepare in such a way that when you do get lucky, you're ready to take advantage of it. And I have a little statistic here that I actually kept myself. I kept 5 years of data of my pool tournaments. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that does this, but I'll give you my personal experience from keeping the data, and you can, glean from it what you will. But I found that you tend to do your best about 1 out of 3 tournaments. And maybe that's a bad way to phrase that. I mean, it seems like 1 out of 3 events really go your way. Like you got a 1 out of 3 chance to get really good rolls that event. And, that was just my experience, but it seemed like I would have an event and I would do pretty well. Let's say second, third, fourth, something like that. So, successful. But then I would have an event where I did very poorly. I wouldn't make the money, or I would have great chances to win and I wouldn't, things like that. But then the next event, I'd win. Like that would be when I would get the win. And then it seemed like every 2 or 3 years, like let's call it 2.5, split the difference. You'd kind of hit a little hot streak where you might win 2, 3, 4 events in a row. And that was my experience with keeping the data. So I keep that 1 in 3 rule kind of in my head. And it turns out that going into the Energy Capital 9-Ball Classic here, I was on that third one. Like I had done poorly my last event, but I had done really well the event before that. And so I kind of thought, I was like, man, this is number 3. Like I might be kind of spiking here on the roll meter. And then it turns out that I was. Now, could that be complete BS? Absolutely. But that's been my experience, though. About 1 out of 3, you tend to get your best chance to win. So you need to be prepared for that. And once again, I felt like I was, which was nice. And that, I'm going to go ahead and call that the end of my story there. I hope you guys can glean something from that. That's at least How to Win a Pool Tournament by Adam King. And there's nothing else like that, I don't think, on the internet. So that's another reason I wanted to do it. This is kind of, no one's ever really sat down and explained how they won a big event like this. And, we'll see if you guys like that. I hope you do. And I hope it was entertaining enough. I wanted to thank a few people here at the end. Chuck Wise, once again, can't say enough about that guy. He runs a fantastic tournament. If you're anywhere in the Denver, Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska kind of region, you should definitely hit that up. The tournament gets a little bigger every year. Chuck really grinds it out for the players and treats everybody fantastic. Joshua Ramey's been up there doing the stream, so you get your matches on Bad Roll Inc. And if you have matches that people like to watch, you'll even make some money off those matches. I just made like $35 off all those matches. I mean, that's pretty sweet. Who else is paying you to just be filmed? Which is really sweet. Once again, I want to thank all the guys from Andy Cloth, Monty Thayer, Anthony Lucero, EJ Glode. I'm going to list all the sponsors for the Energy Capital 9 Ball Classic in the comments section, or in the title section of this podcast, because I really appreciate all those guys, and they come out every year and support Chuck in the tournament and the regional pool scene. So thank you. Special thanks to Frankie Urbaniak. I hope I'm not butchering your name too bad, buddy. But he kind of talked to me gave me some constructive criticism about the podcast, which I really appreciate. Thank you to everybody out there that send messages and talk to me at the tournaments and said they like what I'm doing or offered me a little constructive criticism on how I could do it a little bit better. We're going to have some video stuff coming soon as we kind of get the studio situation figured out, and we're going to do a little bit of some instructional stuff, but in a different way than everybody else is doing it. I hope it's fun, and I hope it's not just silly, but even if it's just silly, that'll be fun too. Thank you guys very much for listening. I'm going to keep this episode a little shorter this time. Derek Pacheco out there, he was like, "Hey man, I'm trying to get through this in a couple bathroom visits." So we're thinking of you, Derek. Anyway, thank you guys out there, and I'll be recording another episode here real soon. So thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you later.